Okay, thanks. Ooh, sorry. Okay, so everybody, this is Emily. Maybe give a wave and welcome her here.
Hi,
Um,
Emily. Hi, Emily.
so who would like to start by asking Emily questions? Actually, maybe I'll just, somebody was wondering about all of your character development because there was this question of, did you go back and decide on sort of everybody's childhood and all of that first, and then pick and choose? Like, how did you come up with such sort of multi-layered characters who you seem to have known forever?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. And that's a great question. I do not generally do a ton of pre-writing. Like basically my rule is I don't really like I might write down like a couple of little details as they pop into my head, but mostly before I write a book, I try and just have things going kind of in the background in my brain for a few weeks. And then it gets to the point where it feels like I have enough to write. And so for that reason, I think like Poppy and Alex's personalities were immediately like fairly clear to me, but I didn't have backstory for them really at all. And as I was writing, I do think a lot about childhood always, which is kind of funny because when you're writing a book about characters in their 30s, it like maybe seems a little counterintuitive to be like, the kind of the emotional arc is still rooted in like things that happened when they were children. But I feel like that's really accurate, at least in my life. And I feel like when you go to counseling, you find out how much of like what's going on now actually is like directly related to like something that you like mislearned or whatever as a kid. And so that's like really become an integral piece of my character development. And there's a great book about it, but I've actually only read the first like 15 or 20 pages because as I was reading it, I was like, oh, that's weird. That's what I'm already doing. But this book, Story Genius, I cannot remember the author's name at this moment, but it kind of teaches this method of going back to your character's past and finding sort of like this initial wound and then what that kind of taught them about the world, and then a couple more times that was cemented or shifted. And I think it really is honestly just because I have been in counseling that I already think that way when I'm thinking about characters, like why are they making these decisions. So I didn't know, but I knew their personalities, and as I was writing, things became clearer. And like if Alex is going to be fairly like repressed and stoic, why would that be? What would his childhood have been like? And I think about people in my life who are a little bit more quiet and stoic, and you know, especially if I know their families, that's like very helpful to me. And the same thing with like someone like Poppy, who's kind of all over the place and kind of like starved for attention. And I think about, like Poppy was very easy. I am the youngest child with two older brothers, and so I knew what makes a character like Poppy. Um, so yeah, there is some amount of like as I'm drafting, I really use my first draft to just get to know all of those details of the character. And that means by the end of the first draft, the characters usually have slightly shifted. And so then I do tend to go back in the second draft. And at that point, I really actually know who they are, and I'm able to kind of smooth things and massage things into place so it makes sense with where they're going. Because I so much of my books, like even when there is like a more plot driven situation than in People We Meet on Vacation, is really just about that emotional arc. And so I don't necessarily know what that arc is going to be until I've written one draft to the end, and then it really shapes how the story actually needs to start when I start revision.
Interesting. Who knew? There you go. Um, we also talked a lot about When Harry Met Sally and how you had mentioned that was sort of the starting point, including, by the way, this 15-year-old girl, Emily, who's part of our book group today, and had some very insightful comments about your book, by the way. So anyway, tell us a little bit about how that inspired this story.
Yeah. Okay. So I love When Harry Met Sally, and this is, I think, in the like behind the book essay, but I'll expound on it a little bit. I love it so much, and every fall I kind of get that hankering to watch it and see fall in New York and all of that. And every time that I like start it, I think, am I misremembering how much I liked this movie? Because I just find Harry so obnoxious, and Billy Crystal, it's like getting you on board with him as a love interest is like a little bit tricky, especially I feel like now, like in 2021, whatever year it is. So every time I start it, I think like, Oh yeah, I guess I don't like this one as much as like You've Got Mail. Like You've Got Mail is my favorite. And then as the movie goes on, I just every single time fall so hard for this relationship and find it so sweet and just significant to see two people who are able to get that close, like because they don't actually have an interest in each other romantically in the beginning. And when I was coming up with ideas for a potential second book, I really liked the idea of using that dynamic of two people who meet and are like, nope, nope, we're not, there's nothing here for us to even be friends. Like, this doesn't make any sense. But I also wanted to do something that felt a little bit different. And so, like, from the very beginning, I was thinking of it a little bit as like a gender swapped When Harry Met Sally, where I knew I wanted Poppy to be the one who is like a little bit more off the wall and like over the top and a little bit more grating. And then also specifically, I wanted her to be the one who's less of like, she's a romantic in like the sense of, you know, kind of how she sees the world, but she's not a romantic in terms of romance and in terms of relationships. She's sort of pragmatic in this way of just like, oh, I'm interested in you. We could date for a while. That could be fun. Like that will be an experience. And is just sort of open to the world in that way. Whereas I think of Alex as much more kind of like traditional in as much as that he like wants a stable, steady, loving relationship. And he really craves that kind of bond and intimacy, which I think Poppy is like very avoidant of in the beginning. And that really like helped me so much develop the characters. They're not that similar to Harry or Sally, I don't think, but I wanted to do that same kind of dynamic between the two.
Excellent. Well, Ed, does anybody else have some questions you want to ask Emily? You can just
Yes,
jump in, or otherwise I'll just keep asking stuff.
please.
Betsy, go ahead.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Zibby. This is my first book club. I actually worked with Anna Ford, who founded book clubs years ago.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
great small circle. We were talking, and I think it was Connie on here that earlier was saying how the quick talk was so amazing, and it was really quick banter and super sharp and quick. And I always say, like, I have a 5-minute delay. Like, I 5 minutes later have like the best comeback, and it's, you know, way gone. So I loved being able to like live through her and being that person who was just so sharp tongued when you needed to. It's great to hear that you have brothers. So can you tell, is that your voice? Like, do you talk and think that fast?
It really totally depends on who I'm with. And I think that was something that was really fun about Poppy and Alex to me, was that for whatever reason, just knowing their characters so well, I did feel like in general, I knew how each one would respond to certain things. But it's just this sort of thing where like, there are plenty of days where I get home from an, you know, an experience and have that same, like, this is what I should have said. And I think, you know, like even like doing something like this versus writing an essay is very different. Just having that lag of like writing something down, you have time to come up with what you would like to say. But I do think that is like something that I have been I've had a pretty easy time with compared to other elements of writing that I've had to really work hard at. And I think there's just nothing more exciting than when you meet someone who you just have that kind of kinetic energy with, and it just feels like they're setting you up, you know, for success over and over again. And those are the kinds of people that like when you meet them afterward, you're just immediately like, I have a new friend. I'm so excited. So yeah, I mean, definitely that's like, I think that's just the most exciting feeling in the world, whether it's like a platonic, you know, friendship or a romantic relationship where you just feel like your brains are on the same wavelength.
Amazing. Awesome.
Thanks for your question.
Okay. Who's anybody else? Shelley?
I would just love to know kind of your journey to publication, like how you got started writing, and you know, just how, I don't know if you have an agent or an editor, but just how you kind of made your way into the publishing industry.
Yeah, so I had, I think, pretty much the most common and normal, you know, publishing experience, which I think of as like a really good thing when I'm talking to people who are pursuing publishing, because I think sometimes you can think like, oh, I need to I mean, maybe at a certain point in history, like it really was beneficial to like live in the city and to have connections in publishing and all of that. And I had none of that. I had one publishing connection who had been sort of like a mentor to me when I was doing a writing residency at the end of my undergrad time. But so he like, you know, when I was ready to query, he was like, here's who you should query. Here's one person that I have a personal connection to. And that was the only editor who really did not like what I did. And that was like it was just a very comforting experience to realize like, if you want to publish, I think that you actually can. It might be a hard road, but you don't need to like find a magic bullet. So my process was very traditional. I went to school for writing, which I don't think you have to do, but it was very fun. And afterward, I just got a full-time job and wrote in the mornings and in the evenings when I had energy. And the biggest thing was I kind of made my weekends like writing days, to the extent that if people asked me to do anything, I said like, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm working, even though I wasn't being paid for what I was doing, which I think is like a weird kind of boundary that you have to build, just finding, even if it's an hour a week, that you're like, I can't do anything else this hour this week unless an emergency comes up because I'll be working. So yeah, I just wrote and revised on my own for a couple of years and read some craft books, which I feel like I have just learned and accepted that I'm a person who mostly learns by doing. And so there are a lot of finished manuscripts that were no good, that I got to the end of a book and just knew I don't want to spend any more time on this, and that's a bad sign. So after I'd written a few books, I went through querying agents, you know, writing query letters, just Googling like, how do you write a query letter, and trying a bunch of different versions and getting a ton of rejections and all of that. And I did that, like, I think for on and off for like a couple of years, querying seriously. Every time I would have like a round of rejections, it would really throw me off, and I would take a few months before I queried again, which I don't regret, but I do feel like that's something that people need to like take with more of a grain of salt. If you're querying and getting a ton of rejections, like, don't let that scare you off. It's part of it. And then finally, like, you know, after a couple of years of querying, I signed with an agent for a book that did not end up selling. It was kind of on the tail end of a trend. And I got a lot of great feedback from editors, but they were ultimately like, this is not a book that people are buying right now. So while that was going on, I was working on the next thing, which is what they always tell you to do, like always be writing when you're able to, like, don't put all of your eggs in one basket, etc. And so after the first book failed to sell, we had some editors who we knew liked my writing in general, just not what I was doing in that book. And so we were able to take it back out with a more refined list. And I sold the book to a YA publisher, did that for a few years. And then while I was doing that, just wrote Beach Read on a whim for myself, and ended up shifting into the romance space. So like I said, no magic bullet really for me. I do have friends who like had a friend from college who was a published author who read their manuscript and then was like, I have to show this to my agent, or like, I have to show this to my editor, or whatever. But I did not have that path. And probably 98 or 99% of my publishing friends did the exact same thing. They were just like Googling how to like get published, and then Googling agents, like who would be a good fit for this book, and reading the acknowledgements at the back of similar books to see who represented that book and all of that. So it's just like a ton of Googling. It's really not fun. And it's like so separate from everything else you do in the writing field that it just feels like you're being asked to do an entirely different job for a while, and it's very fatiguing. But, you know, it's part of the process, unfortunately.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley.
Okay. Any other questions here?
I have a
Laura Beth.
question.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Who said
Hi,
I?
Emily.
Okay.
I just,
Laura Beth, go ahead.
and you may have already answered this partially, but what's your absolute favorite part about being an author?
Yeah.
And then it may be this query issue, may be your least favorite. You'd rather throw back to 2020. And then one more, if you can meet any author, who would you want to sit down and talk to?
Oh my gosh,
Great
those are
questions.
all such good questions. Okay, so my favorite part has sort of shifted over the years, because I think when it's going well, first drafts are my favorite part. It's like the excitement of something new, and it's like that first 20,000 words, the first act of a book is really fun. And then I hit a wall and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is terrible. So I think that beginning part is really, really, really exciting and such a great rush. My least favorite part is, querying. Now I don't have to deal with that, so that's okay. My least favorite part is probably copy edits or proofreads, because by the time you get to that stage in the book, the author has already read it like 11 times, and it's really, really hard to then look through your manuscript with a fine-tooth comb when you're just like, I'm so sick of this book. And I'm so grateful for copy editors and proofreaders, because if I didn't have them, I would be like responsible for catching every single typo. And, some typos always make it through and all of that. But it's like the stage of the process where I am just so done with a book, but the book isn't done. And I'm just like, I want to do something new. I want to do something exciting. So that like minutia is never super fun. I think as far as authors I would like to sit down with, I think it would be really fun if she were still living to sit down with Madeleine L'Engle, because she just wrote such weird stuff and had such a unique viewpoint of the world, and was just very strange in a way that I think as a kid made me feel really seen, and like kind of that feeling of like, oh, when you grow up you can stay yourself. As a kid, it's like you think when you grow up you just suddenly like the things that the adults around you like. My husband and I always talk about how like he thought like he would just suddenly be really into sports, because like all of the men he was around were really into sports. And like I was like, I'll have short hair because like all of the adult women I was around had short hair, whatever. And I think like Madeleine L'Engle, she just like kept this weird kernel of magic in her brain, and that would be really fun. And I also would love to sit down with, and would be super daunted to sit down with, Alice Hoffman, who someone recently was like, that's the logical jump from Madeleine L'Engle as a kid. It's like then you're an Alice Hoffman reader as an adult, but I think that would be really cool too.
Well, Madeline sounds quite a bit like your Poppy character in a lot of ways, how you just described her.
Yes, kooky, kooky and strange.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm happy to connect you, by the way, if you want, with Alice Hoffman.
Oh my gosh. Again, that's like the thing of like, do you like, would I want to meet Beyonce? I don't know. It would be terrifying. What do I say to Alice Hoffman other than I love you?
Okay, well, just let me know.
Thank you, Zibby. Maybe someday.
Okay, when you're ready. I'll
just ask.
okay, Razy, go ahead. Oh, and Felicia. Oh, sorry. Wait a minute. Wait, I forgot. Felicia had wanted to talk last time. So Felicia, you go
Okay,
first.
sorry.
Sorry. You
I'm
can
sorry.
You can fire me.
So I guess the two questions that I have for you is that is there long-standing relationships that you have in your own life that you were sort of pulling from in order to show this connection between Alex and Poppy? And did you ever consider that maybe the ending of the book is that they don't get together, but instead, maybe they find their one true in their own separate place?
Yeah, those are both great questions. So I'll start with the second question. I didn't really consider that, because I knew that I wanted to be writing a story that would make romance readers happy, and they're all about that, happily ever after. But that is a struggle going forward, because I love romance and I love writing in romance. But I do think about that. It's like that's not always going to be the right natural ending for two characters. And I think with Poppy and Alex, it so easily could have gone the other way. And maybe someday still will. But I think, the reason that I was drawn to writing this story was that I actually didn't ever make a decision like Poppy makes in this book. I have a lot of friendships that have like a weird echo. Sorry about that.
Here, wait. Let me mute this. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I have a lot of friendships that have lasted like through childhood or college to now, and have kind of like shifted into the territory of those people being like family to me. And when I decided I wanted to write this book, something that was really exciting to me was writing a character who makes a different decision. Because I think as a person who's somewhat romantic in nature, whenever, you know, growing up in college, whatever, I would have a new friend, a new male friend, there would always be that moment of like, well, I really like you and you really like me. Like, should this be something other than a friendship? And I always decided like, no, I think that we're good as friends, and I really like love this person, respect them so much, and I don't want to risk that ever going away. And I have no regrets about that. But I thought it would be really fun to write a character who reaches that moment, and that moment doesn't just go away. Because in all of my friendships, it's like you reach that point, you kind of make a decision, no, this isn't going to be anything, and then eventually you've settled into this deeper level of friendship, and you know, those people have become like family to me. But with Poppy, I really wanted to get her into that moment and just see what happened if that moment didn't go away, and just sort of kept happening over and over again for years, when she was already so close to and so invested in this person that losing him would be like losing a family member.
Yeah, I was telling the group earlier, I have a friend who I've known, you know, I knew him like over 20 years. He actually recently passed away.
I'm so sorry.
But this book like really reminded me of all the fun times that we had together, and all the banter and the inside jokes, and you know, always bringing our significant others into the mix.
Yes.
And seeing how that works out. And you know, and so it brought a lot of like really good memories to me.
Oh, good. That makes me so happy. I mean, I'm very sorry that you're dealing with that loss, but I'm glad that the book could be a good reminder instead of the opposite.
And if you ever want to read a funny book about being rejected in publishing, Suzanne, her name is Suzanne Kelman. She wrote a book called The Rejected Writers Book Club.
Yeah.
And they literally get together and they celebrate the fact that all of their storylines are being rejected.
That sounds so fun. Yeah,
It's a really great fun read.
That's awesome. And that's so normal. And I love the idea of that being like more normalized, because I think there's so much of a, not just in publishing, but in publishing specifically, there's so much of this fake it till you make it mentality of where you need to like pretend everything's going very well for you, and like you're very successful, you know, you share all of the good things that get written about your books, and it's like that's what people see, so everybody kind of feels like everyone else is having a great time. Whereas actually there's a lot of rejection. Even at this point in my career, there's still things that I get passed over for, and lists I don't make, and all of that, and it, you know, it never really stops. And I love that there's somebody out there like reveling in that.
Yeah.
Awesome. I just put the link to that book in the chat, by the way, if anybody
Thank
wants
you.
the Rejected
Yes,
Writers Book Club
I
or
need
whatever.
to join the rejected
That
ones.
sounds
I
so
love that.
Okay, who was next?
Me?
Oh, Razy, go ahead. Wait.
I just wanted to ask you whether you ever considered writing also from Alex's point of view. Of course, we get to know a lot about Alex through Poppy, but we hear his voice too.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if that was ever a consideration for you.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And, you know, in a lot of my favorite like love stories, you do get both points of view, and it's really fun. I think there were two reasons. Well, there are two big reasons that wasn't really going to happen in this book. The first was I wasn't convinced I could do it well. I knew I could do Poppy's voice very well. I wasn't sure I could do Alex's voice internally that well, and keep it, you know, really fraught with tension and really feeling like you don't know for sure how exactly things are going to play out. But the other thing is that I just don't know if you could take two characters through 12 years of sort of like misses and be telling, you know, be showing both people's points of view, because then it's like, okay, well, you know, year 3 or whatever, you're both pretty much obsessed with each other. We're going to go through 9 more years. So even though it's not like a huge mystery at any point in the book, what exactly is going on, I think to ask a reader to sit with that for that long is already like kind of a big ask. And it might have been even more excruciating if you were hearing both characters' thoughts throughout the whole thing.
Okay.
Thank you for your question though. That's a great one.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other? Yes, Emily. Wait, hold on. Let me do the spotlight. Okay. Go ahead, Emily.
Hi, I read Beach Read and People Can Get a Vacation, and I love both of them. And I was just wondering if like there was one that you enjoyed writing more than the other, and also if like between January and Poppy, if you had like a favorite character between them and like which one you related to most.
Yeah, those are great questions. Okay, so the writing process, I think Beach Read was really, really special for me because it was the first time in a couple of years that I had written something that I did not think was going to be published. And so when I was writing it, I really was just writing it, you know, to do something fun for myself. Even though it's not only like a fun book per se, it was really like a joyful experience for me because I wasn't thinking about how anyone else would receive it or if anyone would like it. I really was just like, what do I want to happen next? And that was really fun. But writing People We Meet on Vacation was also so fun. And I had tried to start like a lot of books before I started People as potential follow-ups to Beach Read. And they just felt like none of them were really clicking, and I could have just pushed through and tried to make it happen and revised it and whatever. But when Poppy and Alex kind of came to me, they were so clear that it was another weirdly easy writing experience because they just knew what they would say and what they would do. And it was fun to take them to all those different places. So I don't know. I'm tempted to say, I don't know which one was more fun. I really don't. I mean, I have a lot of books that I've written that were not fun and I still really love them, but both of these were actually very fun to write. As far as main characters, do I have a favorite? I think if I were friends, if I met both of them, I think I would love Poppy instantly and want to just hang out with her and follow her around and let her, you know, kind of like take me through her world. But I think eventually she would also really stress me out. And January, she might take a little bit longer to get to know. I think like I've asked all of my friends at this point who've read the book, like, am I more of a Poppy or January? Because I've started getting asked that question, and everyone I'm close to says I'm a Poppy when you first meet me and a January when you get to know me. I think I'm a little bit more melancholy than Poppy, but I think that can be the first impression that I make sometimes depending on my mood. So I relate to both of them. I love both of them. I don't know if I have a favorite either. That's really hard. I think, yeah, I'm like looking at the book like that's going to tell me. I don't know that I have a favorite. Do you have a favorite? I'm curious to know which you prefer.
I love both of them, but personally, I think I liked January more just because I felt like in Beach Read, we got to see a lot of also not just romance, but a lot of her like personal struggles with like her dad dying and stuff. So I thought I could like relate to her a little bit more and stuff as like a whole person, not just romance.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love both of them.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that the two of them would be friends. But yeah, January's got a little bit more obvious depth maybe than Poppy does. She likes to stay on the surface more.
Thanks, Emily. Our new my new favorite little book clubby.
Yeah, amazing.
Okay, well, thank you, Emily. It's already been half an hour. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for chatting about your books. Thanks for delighting so many of us this summer with this enjoyable, your enjoyable reads, and we can't wait for the next book. Tell everybody the name of the next book and all that so we can.
My next book is called Book Lovers. It comes out May 3rd, and it is the story of a very thorough city person named Nora, who is a literary agent, and then the male lead is Charlie, who is a hard-headed editor at a publisher.
Amazing. Very inside industry. Love it.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. Everybody, say goodbye and thanks. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
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 Hope your daughter feels better.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yes.